Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Loan Officer Training Series with the Mortgage Calculator. Tonight, we're going to be talking about how to structure an ITIN loan. Give us just a minute here to go live on all the different platforms. We appreciate everybody tuning in nice and early. Just give us a minute here. We got the chat up on the screen there. Feel free to drop a comment there in the chat as you tune in. We'll get started here in just a moment. Great topic here for today. See some comments coming in there already. Appreciate it. All right, looks like we're live on all the different platforms, so we'll go ahead and get it started here. We'll take the chat off the screen for now, but go ahead and drop comments and questions in the chat. So welcome, everyone. My name is Kyle Hershey. I am the COO of the Mortgage Calculator, joined here by our president, Nick Hershey, and our sales manager, Jose Gonzalez. We are a lender that specializes in non-QM loans, and what we do every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern on this show is do a deep dive into a loan officer training topic. And tonight's topic is going to be how to structure an ITIN borrower loan. So I'm sure Jose will be able to talk about for us what an ITIN borrower is in the first place, and then talk about how to structure a loan for them. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Jose.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for tonight's training on how to structure an ITIN borrower loan. Very popular segment right now in non QM. I would say the segments in non QM with the most movement right now would be bank statement loans, DSCR loans, and ITIN loans. So we've had a lot of improvement in guidelines for the ITIN loans and the DSCR loans. You've all seen the 15% down DSCR loans now with a couple of more conduits that we can send those loans to, and the ITIN loans as well, all the way from full doc ITIN, bank statement ITIN, P&L ITIN, and DSCR ITIN as well. So we're looking at quite a few additional offerings in the ITIN realm in primary as well as second home and investment properties. So let's get right into it right now because, like we all like to do, we here at the Mortgage Calculator, we like to break it down first so that we understand what it is that we're dealing with. Because a lot of the issues here is in terms of the theory, the terminology, and then how to interpret that in the guidelines. So to properly interpret the guidelines, you got to know what we're trying to interpret, right? So what is an ITIN? ITIN. An ITIN is an individual taxpayer identification number. That's the clinical definition for ITIN. Now, some important points here to note. An ITIN is not a substitute for a social security card. The purpose, the reason that the borrower has, or that this individual has an ITIN to begin with, is because they are not able to obtain a social security card because they do not have US based legal status. In order to get a social security card, you have to have status in the US. Every now and then you might see those cards, social security cards, issued with the stamp that says not valid for work in the US unless also accompanied by a work authorization and employment authorization document, right? Your EAD card, work permit. The ITIN is only available to individuals with a foreign or alien status, like I was just saying. A U.S. citizen, a U.S. permanent resident, and a U.S. non permanent resident alien will never have an ITIN. They will have Social Security cards. Why? Because they're legally authorized to work in the U.S. The citizen definitely legally authorized to work in the U.S. Permanent resident alien also definitely legally authorized to work in the U.S. They don't have to have a work authorization document. The permanent resident alien card is the work authorization document. And then the non permanent resident alien, like I always like to state, is an individual legally allowed to work in the United States, uh, permanently residing, at least while they're working in the US, right? Permanently residing in the United States. And then if they have US based credit and can meet the income verification guidelines for the program they're applying for, they can also apply for US for credit for U.S. nationals, like a 5% down conventional loan, for example. That's a non-permanent resident alien, right? So now we go one step below the non-permanent resident alien is the ITIN borrower. I say one step below in terms of their status here, because the ITIN borrower does not have legal work status here. They don't have an employment authorization document. They don't have the visa that's going to give them the employment authorization, like an E2 visa, but they are living here in the US full time, working here, deriving their income here. And if they have credit here and can meet the income documentation requirements for the program that they're applying for, they can also obtain a loan here. And then at the bottom of that totem pole of, I guess we call these immigration statuses, is the foreign national who, as we've covered recently in some of our trainings, does not have legal authorization to work in the United States. You're not going to use any income that they derive in the United States to qualify them for the loan. They're not required to have US based credit, and they don't live full time in the US. The ITIN, the purpose of the ITIN, the individual taxpayer identification number, is also to help individuals comply with U.S. tax laws and submit income tax returns when the law requires them to, which is at the end of every work year. You file your income tax. The ITIN does not authorize work in the U.S., so just because somebody has an ITIN letter or an ITIN card does not mean that they're authorized to work in the U.S. And the ITIN looks similar to a Social Security card. And it has a 9-digit number beginning with a number 9. What is an ITIN borrower? Well, we've touched on some of it already as I was, giving you my description, I guess, of the immigration totem pole, right? Starting from our U.S. national to permanent resident, non-permanent resident alien, ITIN, foreign national. So the ITIN borrower derives their income solely from the U.S., lives full time in the U.S., needs to have U.S. based credit and meet credit requirements for the selected program, not to be confused with a foreign national, which is a borrower that does not have to live full time in the U.S., does not have to derive their income from the U.S., and does not need to have U.S. based credit, the foreign national. So, what are some of the document requirements? Now, again, and let me touch base a minute, I guess, on the slide. Just, it is a common, let's click back to that one, because it's a common mistake for an ITIN borrower to be confused with a foreign national borrower. That's why I stress the last point on how to not confuse them with each other, because it's pretty basic and obvious reasons why one is not the other, but it is a common confusion. So, what are some of the document requirements for an ITIN loan? This is where we run into some stumbling blocks, right? Because these documents may not be readily available, or they may be expired, and an unexpired copy, renewal, whatever you want to call it, may not be readily available to be able to close a loan, and we may not have a workaround. So that's very important that you note the first item usually needed is an unexpired ITIN, the actual document, the letter, the document. The borrower is also going to need US based credit meeting the program guidelines for whatever program they're applying for. Look at the matrix. The ITIN borrower needs to have a valid, unexpired picture ID, state issued, government issued, municipal issued, but it has to be issued by some type of U.S. government entity. Now, it may be, again, depending on the guidelines of the loan, it may be from the U.S. or it may be from their country of origin, like their passport, if they happen to have an unexpired passport still. The whole idea is here verifying their identification. Now, in some cases, with some guidelines, the ITIN may have to provide documents showing their initial entry into the country. So please carefully review the guidelines to ensure that you're not going to have any issue with now all of a sudden being asked for like an I-94 entry card into the U.S. that was stamped originally by immigration when you got in here, and they may not have whatever necessary documents showing legal entry into the country at some point. So again, I'm not saying that's a requirement for every ITIN loan. I'm just saying that I have seen that requirement every now and then. So keep an eye out. The ITIN borrower also has to be able to qualify income wise for the income type for the option chosen, right? So whether you're looking at a full doc loan, a self-employed borrower who's going with bank statements or profit and loss, or a 1099, whatever it is, even though, I mean, I don't know if usually you would have a 1099. Well, yeah, I guess you could have a 1099 for an ITIN borrower. It just may be difficult to get a W 2 for an ITIN borrower because the W 2 needs a social security number. The ITIN, they can use a tax ID number. There's not any payroll deductions being taken out there. So, again, depending on the loan type or the income type, because we have DSCR options, right? No DTI ever considered there. DTI max is going to vary between 43 and 50% depending on the option chosen, because as we know, all guidelines are different in the non-QM world. That's actually the beautiful thing, because just imagine if in non-QM all guidelines were the same, homogeneous, and then what would be your reason for going from one option to the other, right? Maybe a little bit of a difference in the rate, but you may be stuck if you need a little extra juice somewhere, some extra flexibility somewhere, and you don't have it. Well, we do have it right now. That's the beautiful thing about non-QM. All guidelines are different. So, so now this slide's a little busy here. I tried to squeeze in a lot of information here because I'm trying to just now we're getting more into the structure part here, right? Where we're talking about actual loan options, right? So now we identified what is an ITIN, right? We identified ITIN borrowers and what they are and what they aren't. And now we talked a little bit about document requirements as well. It's pretty basic, the requirements, but you know, they can become an obstacle because of the unexpired uh, aspect of the document. So now let's get into some loan options, some different structure options. So now the beautiful thing, like I mentioned, is that in the ITIN loans, we are now able to structure deals for primary residences, second homes, and investment properties. And we're able to go the full spectrum of income documentation from full doc using traditional tax returns, right, for a full doc self-employed borrower to bank statement, option, 1099, P&L, and even TSCR for our full investment option. Now, for our primary purchase, rate and term refis and cash outs for a full doc, you're looking at 85%, up to 85% max LTV on a purchase and 80% on a cash out. Bank statement, also 85% purchase, 80% cash out. Those are pretty amazing options, right? Now, these are primary, remember. 1099 is 85% LTV, 80% 85% on the purchase, 80% on the cash out, and P&L a little bit lower because the P&L is just that type of a program. They're basically using a report prepared by the borrower's accountant to qualify the borrower, not an audited report either. And this is up to 80% LTV on the purchase and 75% on the cash out for our primaries. Now, second homes, your LTV is typically dropping 5% for all the options across the board. So full doc, 80% LTV purchase, 75% cash out. Bank statement, 80% purchase, 75% cash out. 1099, remember, that's a great option there, 1099, where we can use up to 80%, up to 90%, of the income on the 1099 to qualify the borrower. A lot easier in that respect than a bank statement option, but they got to be getting a 1099 to use the 1099 option, right? Sounds pretty self-explanatory. Up to 80% purchase and 75% cash out, and the P&L up to 80% purchase and 75% cash out for the second home options. And our last category here, investment properties. Again, similar LTVs to the second homes because in non-QM, they view second home and investment property as pretty much almost the same thing. Only difference is that on the second home, you can't put a prepayment penalty. You can't close it in an LLC. The investment property, you can close it in an LLC or any other entity that's acceptable. And you can add a prepayment penalty to get better pricing. That's why sometimes I see better pricing in some of our investment property options than I do in our second home options because of the prepayment penalty. So on an investment here for ITIN, right, this is a very sweet part of the presentation here because we can go full doc, the same up to 80% purchase, 75% cash out. Bank statement, 80% purchase, 75% cash out. This is an area that has been seeing vast improvement in guidelines in the matrices for ITIN loans is on the alt doc. P&L also 80% purchase, 75% cash out. 1099, 80% purchase, 75% cash out. And the most beautiful option of all, the DSCR up to 75% LTV on a purchase and 70% LTV on the cash out. So now in our last slide here, we're just going to go over a couple of different excerpts from some guidelines that I took out. These are guidelines from two of our different conduits, just so you could see how this mirrors a lot of what I've been presenting here. But again, all guidelines are different and they give you different workarounds. So the first guideline there, they're basically telling us what an ITIN borrower is. A non-permanent resident alien without a social security can qualify using their ITIN, which is an acronym for individual taxpayer identification number. So it says right there, borrower must possess a valid, that means unexpired, ITIN card or the IRS ITIN letter and an unexpired government photo ID. Notice it says government photo ID, like a driver's license, international passport, right? I did mention that in the previous slide. In this example, this guidelines max DTI is 50%. They allow gift funds as long as the borrower contributes 5% of their own funds on primary and second homes. And the borrower has to contribute at least 20% of their own funds on investment properties. And again, notice to the detail above 80%, no gift funds allowed. Now, here's a real important category, bullet point in this guideline. This is pretty much to be expected because, see, the ITIN borrower does not have legal status here, which probably means that if they leave, they're probably going to have a tough time getting back into the country. They may or they may not because they don't have a reentry document, right? So, hence, a power of attorney where the borrower would not be present to sign somewhere else, and remote online notarization, also known as RON closing, are prohibited, right? They want the borrower to sign in person. It's enough the loan's getting done for the ITIN borrower with all of the issues they already have going on with status. Uh, so they got to sign in person. No power of attorneys, no Rons signing where back home in their original country. That would be a big red flag. And then in this particular guideline, they're just telling us the different programs that the ITIN could qualify for, and in those programs are all the income types that I mentioned. And then the sample guideline on the right is pretty interesting, gives us a little bit more insight into what they're looking for and what could cause an issue for an ITIN loan. All documentation in file must support the borrower's ITIN number and cannot reference a social security number belonging to another individual, because sometimes the borrower may work with a social security number at the employer where they get a W 2 so that the employer can correctly, submit the payroll taxes to the U.S. government. However, that borrower cannot use any of that documentation referencing that social security number that obviously belongs to somebody else, because just by the nature of the loan, there being an ITIN borrower means they can only use the ITIN, the individual taxpayer identification number. Now, we were talking about the unexpired ITIN, right? So here's a pretty cool workaround that this option provides. Now, mind you, this option does not go to as high of an LTV as to the one on the left. The one on the left goes a 5% higher LTV. But this one gives you some pretty good workarounds. Like if your borrower has expired ITIN documents, or can't provide the unexpired ITIN documents, they can, if it's a full doc or a 1099 loan, um, you can request transcripts. So it says current executed transcripts will validate the borrower's current ITIN status, right? If there's a transcript that shows a 1099 was filed on that ITIN's number, that verifies that the ITIN is active. And then for alt doc loans, which would be our bank statement and our P&L loan, it could be an IRS letter dated less than 3 years ago, a fully executed W-7, including the agent's signature, or a letter from their tax preparer confirming they have filed the borrower's most recent tax return with the IRS, right? The old third party verification letter from the tax preparer slash accountant slash CPA. So these are just two of the sample guidelines of the many ITIN options that we have at the Mortgage Calculator. Remember, each one of our options is a different conduit that we have an option to send that loan to, depending on what is the best combination of lowest interest rate and cost for the borrower, combined with a guideline that will allow that loan to close with whatever issues or shortcomings or obstacles that borrower may have. So again, remember the ITIN loans. Remember, they're not foreign nationals. They're not permanent resident aliens. They are what they are, an ITIN, a borrower with an individual taxpayer identification number that's working here in the United States, filing taxes here in the United States, and has United States-based credit.
All right. Thank you, Jose. Surprisingly, I don't see any questions. But I think a big thing to remember again is the difference, right, between the different programs and citizenship. But all right, still don't see any questions. So I think we can wrap it up. Are you going to say something?
No, just everybody remember that the ITINs. Don't forget the DSCR loans, because people that really blows people's minds when they can do ITIN DSCR loan.
All right. All right. Well, remember we do this at 7 p.m. Eastern on Monday, or excuse me, not Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, where we go through a new training topic. So we will see you all tomorrow with a new topic. We appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the next episode of the Loan Officer Training Series with the Mortgage Calculator. Take care, everyone.